All right, welcome everyone to Visionality's Building Forward. I am so excited that you're joining us today. We have our special guest star, Tony, and remind me of your title because it keeps growing every time we talk to each other. So what do you do in the world, Tony?
So I have the pleasure of leading about 30 employees and about 1,200 Red Cross volunteers in all things Red Cross in the Central California region.
Wonderful. And we've done a little bit of work together in my sort of side hustles of disaster response. And so today we are talking about disaster preparedness and taking it, you know, from both a business perspective, but also a nonprofit perspective. And what can we each do as an organization? What's important for us to do annually, monthly, just to be aware of, so that we can recover quickly, be safe, and then turn around to support our community. Because that's the other really interesting factor, right? As we're doing disaster planning for nonprofits, quite often you as an organization could be in a recovery phase. Your board members, your volunteers, your donors could all be in a recovery phase, and you're expected to respond. And so that's just a very different, nuanced position that a lot of our colleagues play in disaster response. So should we jump into it?
Let's
Let's.
go.
Okay, so we have here the Visionality Disaster Plan. And Tony, today we are going to go through this. And so, just a little peek behind the curtain. We did go through this a week ago, thank goodness. And you helped us shore it up a little bit because there are always opportunities. But we're just going to go through this. And this is literally the disaster document that we work from. We update it annually. And so, we're going to talk through it, but then we're also going to make some notes about what everyone should be thinking of. Also don't feel like you need to take notes because we will send this out to everybody, and it'll actually be a nonprofit version that has specific areas that nonprofits need to fill in. So we're just gonna like hop right in. So the best disaster response plan starts with preparedness, right? So
Correct.
um we've created a list of things that Visionality will do, needs to do annually in preparedness. And we picked June. We picked June because we're a California based company. The fall is fire season. In our line of work, June, like the summer months, tend to be a bit slower. And so we picked June just based on our business operations. But it's important to pick a month where just in your own line of business tends to be a slower month. So every year in June, we are updating employee contact information and emergency contacts. We are providing employees with suggested preparedness measures, right? If each of us is a little more prepared, then as a community, we're much more resilient. So go bag, most communities have an emergency notification system. And then Tony, can you elaborate on this? We came up with some suggested information, like the information that when someone's in a disaster they forget that they need. So things like a list of medication, right, with
Right.
doses. What else is on that list?
Yes. So not just for you, but for your kids, for your pets, and I know that we talk about this as a nonprofit, but every nonprofit is filled with people. So we want to make sure that as a nonprofit that we are letting our employees or our volunteers or our board members be as prepared as we are as an organization. So what we're asking people to do is make sure that you have all of the important things like, hey, shot records, medication and dosage. It's one thing to know that, oh, well, I know they need this medication, but if you don't have it and you need to get it refilled, you have no idea what it's supposed to be. So, it's really easy just to jot that down. And then some of the other things that we're thinking about is just if you had to just come back to your place of business and your place of business is not there any longer, um, where do you start? And this is a great place for us to start.
Hmm. The other thing that I totally didn't think of was like our vision prescriptions, right? Like what glasses do you wear if you have to leave your home and you don't have glasses? So I'm going to say glasses prescription. What other, when people show up to the shelter, is there any other like super common things, that they need to replace that it's just handy to have written down somewhere?
So some of the other things that we've seen when people show up at a Red Cross shelter is they only have the clothes on their back, and they have no idea of all of the things that their normal day entails because they're going through a disaster. So what we usually do is we sit them down and we don't ask them a whole bunch of questions up off the top. We get them to a point where okay, they feel safe, they understand that someone's here to take care of them. And then what we do is we kind of say, what does your typical day look like? And as we walk them through their typical day, we start to point out some of the things like, okay, so grandma, does grandma have pills that she has to take every day? And it'll take them a little bit, but they'll get there.
Mhm.
So we talk about that and we kind of walk them through their day. Now, I think the best way for someone to be prepared is to just take notes throughout the day of some of the things that you do without even thinking about it. If you could take the time, say maybe a full hour in a day, just to jot down some of the things that you do on a typical day, as you get to the end of the day and you look at that list, you'll say, wow, there's a lot that I do that I don't even think about. And I'm glad that I can see this now on paper. So I know some of the things that I need to do so I am prepared in case of a large scale earthquake, or, we're all quarantined in our homes, or, you, like I said, you come back to your place of business and it's not there anymore.
Love it. Excellent. And this stuff needs to be stored in the cloud, right? And so maybe it's like a Google Doc, or it's, whatever. So again, make sure that this information is updated annually and it's available in the cloud. Um,
Correct.
the next thing we do annually is we review our file storage procedures with each employee, confirming that all the work is being done via the Dropbox cloud. So this is a major piece of Visionality's resiliency program, which is we operate entirely on the cloud. Any document that a Visionality employee should be saved to the Dropbox folder, not to anyone's computers. So if we have a major earthquake, we're going to have to talk later about the electrical systems and the internet going down, and, the Dropbox, Amazon Web Services going down. But in terms of like our documents, they exist out there. And at some point in the next 2 weeks, we can find a way to access those documents. And so for us, and again, thank you for meeting with us a week ago. I'm skipping in saying, oh, Tony, we're so resilient. We use Dropbox. And you're like, well, Emily, what happens if Dropbox goes down? So we added this here monthly measure to download the entire Visionality file system to a physical hard drive. And again, I picked the third week of every month because things are really busy. The fourth week of the month preparing invoices and getting them out the first week. So whatever, I picked the third of the month. We are updating the Visionality property inventory, including pictures and receipts. What the heck do we have and where does it exist? And this is important for insurance purposes, right? If something happens and we need to file an insurance claim, we know what we have and who has it and where it lives. Reviewing insurance policies and making any adjustments, reviewing the current client list. And then this one I think is really interesting. Identify of our clients, right? We're a for-profit company who work with nonprofits. Who of our clients are at a high risk of being greatly affected by a local or regional disaster, and who is most likely to be activated in any disaster response? So, all of our clients will be responding in some way. But for example, the Humane Society of Ventura County, they're a first responder, like, right, they're in the animal master plan versus, Teddy Bear Cancer or the Moxie Museum, right? They're not first responders necessarily, they'll still be affected. So then us just preparing to support our clients through that. What other things should we be looking for, Tony?
So as you're talking about most likely to be activated in a disaster response, if you're a nonprofit, you're going to be affected, but how is that disaster affecting your workforce, your clients, your board? So you want to make sure that you have a 360 outlook on when a disaster happens, how is it affecting the people that are our stakeholders, whether that's the people that donate to the nonprofit, whether that's the people that you are providing services to. You'll need to have a good understanding as far as how much disaster has happened or how much people have been affected. And then that will help you as you start to recover yourself. A lot of nonprofits have a continuity of operations plan. And this is one of those things that people kind of forget about. They go, okay, we're good, we're good, we're good. Okay, but how about the people that you work with or that you work, alongside? You want to make sure that you understand what their landscape looks like so that you can be a better partner for them.
Love it. Love it. We're updating our client contact information, right? To make sure that we can get a hold of them and ask how we can support. We are updating and circulating this plan. We're reminding our employees where to find it in Dropbox and asking them to print this plan out and put it in their go bag, because yes, we're going to ask you to make a go bag. Also, Tony, what the heck are we doing with freezers? This is my favorite
So
thing that came out of our conversation.
So I learned this a few years ago from a firefighter, and he says that, the one place where you can keep documents is in your freezer. He says it's a cold storage. He says in most cases, if you have it in a good bag, a good plastic wrap bag that's got a good seal on it, he said the entire house could burn to the ground. And 9 times out of 10, your refrigerator is standing tall. He said it's really easy for someone to come back into the home, actually open up the freezer, grab that bag, and you'll have your documents or copies of documents there. I think that is a fantastic idea. I tell it to everyone who will listen. I know I have, copies of my shot records and my COVID-19 record. I have a copy of that in there. I have a copy of that everywhere, but it's just one of those things where it's like I feel like I'm putting treasure away. It's like I'm just going to zip it up and put it in my little bag and put it in the freezer. Hopefully, I'll never have to go get it. But if I do, I know it's there and I'm fairly sure it's going to be safe.
Wild. Today we learned, put things in your freezer. Excellent. All right. Create and update an emergency WhatsApp team group chat. So talk to me about communication channels, and we're talking in the sense of like a really major regional disaster.
So we've learned that the phone systems may go down. Um, but a text message is a short burst, and that information can get through a lot of times when the phone lines are down. You may be able to get, a quick text out. And what we tell people is that when you have a text group, whether that's just a regular straight up text group or a WhatsApp, we always say this: find someone who is in your work group that does not live in the immediate area. So for Visionality, you have an employee that's not in Southern California. You want to make sure that that person is the person that everyone can call or text or reach out to saying, hey, I'm safe. Um, with that text group, everyone will be able to check on everyone in such a way that it really makes it almost instantaneously, because you want to make sure that all of your folks are taken care of and their families are as well. So that text group, especially with someone who's outside the immediate area, gives everyone an opportunity to, as we used to call it in the military, muster on station. And that means everybody says, I'm safe, or I need help, or we're not good, or we are good. It just gives everybody an opportunity for everyone else to see how we're doing.
Love it. Love it. Annually in June, we are going to update the Visionality onboarding procedures for when we hire new employees to reflect any changes to this plan. We are going to review and update the Visionality chain of command, which is what we talked about, right? So, if it's a local Southern California disaster, Delaney, guess what? You're the queen of the castle. Congratulations, because you don't live here. So just having sort of this chain of command, and when we do what, if it's something, maybe you have only a local employee base, right? And so everyone is equally affected. So maybe that's a group chat to say, who's the least affected, who can become our lead communicator in this moment. I thought about this after our conversation. Annually within the team, we should review our decision-making methodology, right? So that we can each trust one another to make a decision that's in line with the mission, vision, values of our organization. And I was reflecting on a disaster preparedness plan that I was helping a client make, and they work with animals, and we had to make the tough decision and document that there may come a point when we leave the animals, right? And we will prioritize human life. And this is when we decide to go, and it's going to break every single one of our hearts, and this is we will do this. And so the importance of documenting that and communicating it to everybody, that like, we are going to prioritize people in this order. We're going to start, with our employees and their families, and then we're going to branch out to support our community. And so that those can just be really tough conversations to acknowledge that in a major disaster, you have to choose where you focus, right? Can you talk me through that? Maybe ease some of our guilt of saying, like, we're going to take care of ourselves. Like, talk me through it.
Sure, it does talk to this. It does say that here we have an if then scenario. So if this happens, then we go here and then we do this. And everyone has to have buy-in. And you need to make sure that everyone understands that yes, this is the decision that we decided that we were going to do before, so that people don't have that same sense of guilt. Yes, they will feel bad because they're saying this is what we've decided before the disaster. These are the conditions that are in front of us, and with these conditions, this is the path that we're going to move forward. There may be some times where you're sharing that with your team where people just say, I can't do that. And you need to be able to talk through that with them and explain to them why we're doing what we're doing, so that you don't have to make the decision. The decision's already been made. You just need to make the call. And when you kind of tell the people, when you tell people that, it kind of assuages the guilt to a degree where they're saying, this is what the group decided when we were doing our disaster plan. Um, Something else that we talk about is, Emily, if you are in Aspen and you are, enjoying the slopes and you're having a great time and there's a disaster in Ventura County, everyone needs to know who's in charge. So this is another thing that has to happen when we're talking about what that chain of command looks like, and we're talking about decision making methodology. We need to know, okay, Emily's not here. Who's in charge right now? Who has the authority to make the decisions that we've talked about in this decision matrix? So it's really important that we review that and we talk through it, and we make sure that everyone understands and is in alignment with what is being actually decided before the disaster.
Well, and it's additionally complicated when we're talking about nonprofits, right? Because they've got the CEO or the executive director, but they also have the board and the board chair. So I think for our nonprofit specifically, it's going to be really important to have this, again, annual conversation with the board to make sure that everyone understands the chain of command and everyone has buy-in on this procedure.
Correct.
What else is on my annual list?
Let's see. So I think one thing that needs to be on, and it's something that we talk about. We talk about making sure that we have we talk about in the Red Cross. We say you need to have a kit, you need to make a plan, you need to be informed. Where are you going to get the information that you need to get, to make those decisions? Who are you dialed into? Who are you subscribed to? Who are you, where are some of the places that you need to get that vital information? Would that be the county? Would that be the state? Would that be your local city? um, you know Reverse text. Are you dialed into every way of getting information from the local authorities as possible?
Love it. Excellent. Awesome. All right. We already talked about monthly. We're downloading the entire Viz system to a local hard drive. Is there anything else that's happening monthly?
Just reviewing. I know that when we bring new team members on, that we're just reviewing, the roster, and that's just one of those living documents that as people come and go, we're updating that. We're just making sure that that's one of those things that could slip behind the cracks, and you want to make sure that you're on top of it, because if you aren't, you may have a brand new employee that everyone doesn't know, or when you're a smaller nonprofit, it tends to filter down. But the larger nonprofits, if you're not on top of that roster, you may find yourself in a position where you don't have all the contact information, or they don't have all the contact information. So that's one of those things that we try to review monthly as well.
Love it. And so I just increased that to the employee, the board, and the volunteers. Awesome.
Fantastic.
Excellent. We've made it, Tony, to the plan.
Yay.
We made it. Okay, so first I added a section for our approach. Again, the idea is to empower each of my employees to be the lead decision maker if that is the most appropriate situation. So the visionality employee that is farthest from or least impacted by the disaster becomes the company representative. And that's essentially the visionality response and recovery lead. They're the top of our chain of command, regardless of who it is. The primary form of communication will be text messages or WhatsApp to the employee's personal cell phones. All decisions will be made to improve the safety and well-being of visionality employees, their families, and then our clients. So again, we can't do everything at the same time. And so what we're going to do is help our immediate people and families, and then we're going to keep making that circle bigger as we are safe and rebuilding and recovering, right? What else should be added to our approach? What should our nonprofit partners be thinking about?
I think this is actually really good right here, and it's very succinct. And I think the picture that we're trying to draw for our nonprofits is, if we're on the airplane and the masks come down, they always tell you to put your mask on first. You can't help anyone if you aren't in a position that you are stable. So that is really important. So this approach is absolutely spot on.
All right, here's our timeline. And one thing that you brought up to me, these are all quite fluid timelines, right? We don't know if it's 2 weeks from the disaster. It could be 3 days, it could be 2 months, right? But the general idea is this is the order in which things happen. So 24 to 48 hours from the disaster, the company representative notifies all employees of the disaster and discusses the current situation, safety requirement, immediate and urgent needs, and a plan of action in case further disasters happen, right? Perhaps it feels like a big earthquake, but it's coming before the real big earthquake, right? We locally had the fires and then we had the debris flow. So what other things in this initial contact does the company representative need to connect or confirm or understand with the immediate employees?
So I think the one thing that they need to do is they need to make sure that they've heard from the local authorities. You've got to have an outside view of what's happening, because if you don't, then you're not exactly sure where you're going next. So you want to make sure that you've dialed into the local authorities, and you know exactly what the scope and the scale of the disaster is in the initial hours.
Okay, so is that first?
That is one of those things that you want to make sure that, yeah, well,
Yes,
I would say it's kind of in tandem, because your
got it.
phone's going to be ringing off the hook, and you're going to need to be able to say, yes, we do know that I looked at the app. I can tell it was a 5.0 earthquake in Ventura. Now you need to make sure that you're speaking with the local authorities as to what they are advising. It may be hey, we need to do all of these things: boil water, shelter in place. So when you can get all of this information, you can actually promulgate that to everyone in your company.
Right. So our job is to follow instructions in a disaster, right? Someone else is the boss and it just trickles down, right?
Right.
Delaney's the boss of visionality during a large scale earthquake, and Delaney's job is to tell us what her boss said, which could be the county, which could be the fire department, right?
Mhm.
So our whole job is to follow instructions from the
Right.
person above us. Love it.
Mhm.
We are assessing business closure, right? We're going to close. If there's a major disaster, we're going to close. Identify any outstanding business needs within the next 24 to 48 hours. Payroll, especially in a disaster, we got to run payroll, right? People need money. Is there a not negotiable client deadline that, again, could impact their ability to respond or recover from a disaster? I'm just going to put this out there. We're taking care of our people first. Your end of your appeal might be a little late. Identify any critical client support within the next 24 to 48 hours. Again, that'll be referring back to who might be first responders within our client list and how can we help them show up for the community. Provide a timeline to all staff and delegate client check-ins or outstanding business needs to the company representative. If possible, update the Visionality homepage with any necessary information and set a company-wide out-of-office message. What else are we doing in the first 24 to 48?
Right there, just trying to get as much information. I think what there is really good, and this is one of those things that you may have to go back to the very beginning, and it just turns into a cycle for those first 24 to 48 hours as we're starting to get information. I can tell you that for the Thomas fire, yes, we knew the Thomas fire was on top of everything and what it looked like, but we didn't in the first few hours know which way it was moving, what the fire profile looked like. So it really was one of those things where we had to learn and keep learning and relearn, and it wasn't a one and done as far as what the information sharing looked like. So know that you may have to go back to the very top of that list, several times in the first 24 to 48 hours because the information is going to be rapidly changing.
Got it. Love it. Next phase, we're calling it 1 week from the disaster. We'll see. The company representative is checking in with all employees and clients, discussing changes in situations, safety requirements, updated needs, right? So again, what I keep hearing is communication, communication, communication. We are assessing damage and business closure. We're contacting our insurance to review options and file claims if necessary. I'm going to make this its own point, review the county state websites for specific insurance claims available. Again, we're just from this was my big Thomas Fire lesson, is you need to start the data collection as soon as you can. And this is why you tell us to have a pencil and a notebook in our go bag, because when you're in a disaster, you cannot remember anything that happened. You can't remember anything that anybody told you. And so it's just important to start documenting right away, because you're going to need that information in a year when your insurance claim finally gets settled or whatever. Was that being generous? Okay. And my friend Tony keeps freezing because, well, that's how this thing goes. We are also signing up for any relevant email lists for ongoing disaster related support. Locally here, EDC is incredible, the Economic Development Collaborative. For us, that they were the clearinghouse for all of the business and nonprofit disaster relief and support. FEMA, of course, what you want to sign up for all the lists, right? We're creating an action plan to accomplish the immediate goals. We're creating data collection mechanisms to measure disaster related losses and expenses. Again, like if you have real losses, you will be filing an insurance claim. You will be, we saw like the EIDL loans, economic injury disaster loans, those all measure what your economic injury was. So it's important to start collecting that information. And then communicating back to the staff. What else, Tony, are we doing in this second phase of our disaster?
So I think the insurance piece is huge, and I think the other part is trying to figure out where you need to focus for the next month. Uh,
Oh,
that first week out, you are looking nonprofit needs to have to get to a place where you are stable. And in that first week, you know now what the disaster
all right. Tony's coming in and out, but what we're doing is we're determining where we focus during the next
we
month.
need to get to that next stage. So how
Mhm.
to what is it, what's the next 30 days? What do we need to do to get to a place where we're not, you know, disaster responding?
We're so the goal in this plan is to move from response to recovery.
Yes, and you're going to know where your holes are after a week.
Awesome.
After a week, you know exactly where you're lacking. You know what partners need help, and then what you can start to do is you can start, you know, developing what does that recovery look like for yourself and for those, you know, you've been entrusted to serve.
Cool. Awesome. So now we're in our third stage. We're calling it 2 weeks. We're reviewing operations recovery efforts with executive staff or partners. We're identifying short and long-term efforts needed, new office location, losing clients during the disaster. We're reviewing insurance, unemployment claims, review our options with the clients just to make sure that they are recovering alongside us. And then we're continuing to communicate the action plan to staff. What else
Yes.
is happening in this third phase?
So in the third phase, you're actually looking at, okay, so we have a plan. What does that plan look like and how do we need to deviate or modify? And it'll be something that we kind of look at as the ongoing, as we kind of we look into that next phase. But right now we have an idea, we know where we're at, we know where the holes are. Now we're going to bring in we're going to bring in partners, we're going to, you know, if it's our building, we have to get contractors. We know exactly what our recovery looks like and we can move forward. And because we can move forward, we can now help more people because we're now recovery. We're no longer in response. And now what we're doing is we're actually starting to think about that next phase, which is preparedness. So when we think about, you know, a disaster, we're getting prepared and then we're responding and then we're recovering. And when we get to that good spot, that sweet spot in recovery, we should be going right back to preparedness again.
Love it. Love it. So now this ongoing phase, right? We're continuing efforts to restore the business. We're reviewing insurance and unemployment, and we're updating and reviewing this emergency procedures with lessons learned.
Correct. The
Mhm.
lessons learned process is something that, you know, it's invaluable. You'll be able to see where you had a misstep. You'll be able to say, "Hey, we did this well. We could have done it better, or we didn't do this well at all, and this is something that we need to fix." And then you bring all of your stakeholders in, and you try to figure out what that plan looks like. So, a lessons learned, it really does need to be something that's an ongoing thing, part of that notebook that we talk about. Because if you try to sit down and say 1 month after we're going to do a lessons learned, well, you may have forgotten some of the things in the initial response. So we try to remember, and we try to, you know, in the Red Cross we actually have a lessons learned mailbox where people can send things in during the disaster saying, hey, you know, next time we need to try this, or this didn't quite work. So it's an ongoing thing for us. So that is an option for a nonprofit to have a mailbox where you can just kind of jot down those things that you want to remember when it's time to sit down and do your lessons learned.
I can't remember if it's already in here, but I'm going to add to our annual list. Um, Create or review, what is it called? The dump location. Like we're not organizing anything, right? Where's the dump location? Is it we're emailing to info@Visionality, right? Like what is the data collection point? Excellent. Excellent. Um, so that's the plan. So I want to pause just for a minute and open it up for people who have questions for Tony, have lived experience. What did we miss? And then if there's nothing at this moment, then we can keep going through what we have documented in our plan, because what follows here is just like good information to have on hand. But I'm just curious from everyone who's here. I see my friend Tim.
So I love this. And thank you, Emily, for doing it, and Tony for helping her. I have 12 either business owners or CEOs in my group, and I am definitely sharing this with them. The one thing I'm going to add, though, that it may be implicit in this, but on the first steps of contacting people, for them, vendors are very important. They're getting supplies all the time from different vendors of theirs. So I think I'd add that in the business thing. But kudos to you guys. I had no idea how valuable this was going to be when I signed up today. So Tony and Emily, thank you guys for that. Appreciate it.
Great call out.
It's a lot, and it can be really overwhelming, which is why it's like, okay, just do something, right? Just make a step towards the right, with vendors and other critical. How does that feel, Tim? Does that feel like it?
Yeah, I like it. I like it, Em.
Thank you so much. What else? What else do people think? What questions do you have? Or maybe some specific nuances to your organizational operations that you want to ask Tony about?
I got a wise guy comment. Call Vanessa Bechtel and ask for money.
That's not a bad point.
So way down here, where I say I direct everyone to build in contact information for any critical helpers, I'm gonna go ahead and write Vanessa with a smiley face,
Good
right?
idea.
I'll make sure that you said, I'll tell her that you said so, Tim. What else? A few of us have worked through disasters, maybe not in the response team, but just being in our community. So I'm curious if anyone else has lived experience of things that were missing or things that they did particularly well during a disaster. All right, let's keep going then. So this is the information that we recommend you collect and update every year. So business contact information. So this is me and one of our employees. And I'm thinking, actually, Delaney, we should probably update this to you because you're outside of the area, and Llewellyn and I are pretty close physically. Emergency contact information, the non-emergency police line, the fire line, our insurance provider, property management, right? So just collect all the info. Primary business locations. Again, it just seems so silly, but if you're in the middle of a disaster and you have an office, you might not remember that address or the phone number because you don't have anything in your brains anymore. Every employee's contact information, phone and email address, personal address, and then their emergency contact name and phone number. This is so important. And I remember one time we had an employee who had a medical emergency, and she literally didn't show up to work for 2 days. And I called her mom and I was like, hey, is she okay? And she wasn't okay. And so just like in general business operations and taking care of your people, it's really important to keep employees' emergency contact information just in case. And again, we're literally physically printing this out and putting it where? Freezer. And in your go bag. So these are all of our critical business partners. So we've got our bookkeeper, our payroll, our health insurance, all of our other insurances, our graphic designer, our attorneys, our CPA, financial consultant. Where do you bank? Property management, building owner, IT support, media partners. Tony, you added this to the list. Talk to me about the importance of having your media partners and their contact information listed out.
Sure. We can control our social media, but there are opportunities that you can use traditional media to get the message out that you're up for business or that you need help. And I think that is one way that we can actually leverage our media partners to help us with whatever messaging that we're trying to get out. I know that a lot of times, like the Ventura County Star will list what operations are open and who's closed. You want to make sure that you're on that list if you're open. You want everyone to know that we're still operating. It may be at a reduced capacity, but we're still there. So you want to make sure that you can leverage that as well.
Excellent. Also, this, Tim, you mentioned vendors, so this should also be all your vendors. Excellent. We've got our data security and backup information. So again, this is going to say, this is where the Dropbox is, and the physical records are at this address. Important websites and help guides. So this will be different for every regional community, but you can just list out, and I think, Tony, this should be for not only where you're headquartered, but also where each employee lives, right? Or like all the regions that you serve, right? So we've got clients who serve Ventura and Santa Barbara counties, or the tri-counties. So they're going to need to have this information for each community.
Yes.
Excellent. Kind of already talked about this. Again, just collecting all of the phone numbers. If the internet's down, you can't look them up. And then we've got a very basic suggestion for an at-home kit. And again, I'm going to bring it back to like resiliency is preparedness. And so as a business owner or a nonprofit leader, we're in a really critical place to encourage our team to be as prepared as possible, because as a community, we're not independent, right? We can't all be fully prepared, but as a community, if we raise our preparedness level, we will go through less harm as a community, right? I'm just looking at this. A lot of this stuff seems so silly, but it's actually really easy to put together. And one of my recommendations is that you go through your kit annually, right? If emergency rations expire, right? Water expires. And then just having a plan to, when I built my kit, it's in a backpack. And I sort of built my parameters around, I'm going to have one backpack. So what are my critical needs for 3 days, right? And with the assumption that within 3 days, I'll be able to connect with people and start to recover. What else should we be thinking of when we're building our kits? What's the number one missed thing that people don't include in their go bag or their recovery kit?
Flashlight.
Thank you. Crank flashlight. Batteries?
Yes, or battery operated. Anything that's going to work that you don't have to plug in.
One thing I
Flashlight
did
and
this round, I made sure that all of my things use AA batteries. So I had a really cool flashlight, but it had like these D batteries or something. And so I replaced everything so that a AA battery. So then I just need, 8 AA batteries and I can run all my stuff. So I'm going to add batteries. What else?
I would suggest, since we live in California, a solar charger. They're very inexpensive. If you could get like something that would be able to charge your cell phone, and you know that you're always going to have your cell phone handy, I'd say something to that. So that would definitely be one of those things that I know I have one in each of our go bags. We've got 4 of them. They're in the garage, not that far from the interior door. We wanted to make sure that they were somewhere where we could get to them and get out the house kind of quickly. So, and our go bags are kind of heavy because, well, I'm Red Cross and I have to overthink everything when we're talking about preparedness. But everybody's got 3 gallons of water in their gigantic bag. They've got enough food to last them for 3 days, and we've got My youngest has all the dog stuff because it's their dog. So they get to keep all the dog stuff. But we wanted to make sure that we had everything in such a place that everybody could just grab it, or I could grab them all and we can get out the house quickly.
Yeah.
Something that I tell everyone, and this makes it fun, especially when you're talking about people with little ones. When you think about it, you think about how are we going to get through a disaster? I tell everybody, imagine camping out in your backyard for 3 days. You can't go in the house. You can only have everything that you took out of the house with you. So how are you going to be able to camp out in your backyard for 3 days? And I think once you get the kids involved in that, the kids can start talking about what's important to them. That they've got to bring their blankie. They have to bring this stuffed animal. And you're getting the kids to understand that they're getting prepared for it as well, because a disaster really does wreak havoc for an adult. Think about what it does to a kid. So we want to make sure that we have the entire family, and we're talking about this. I know we're talking about this for nonprofits, but I always say that nonprofits are filled with people. Those people sometimes have families, and we want to make sure that being resilient means that we're talking the entire family gets some input into what that preparedness model looks like for the family.
Excellent. I love it. I love it. We talked about animals, so making sure that you've got a little bit of food, you've got, a collapsible water dish, you have including prescriptions. I just, my puppy was nibbling on his leash, and so I bought him a new leash, and I threw his old leash and collar in my disaster bag because I'm whatever, like, why not? Um, let's talk about prescriptions and controlled substances. So there are medications that are critical to people. I have, a couple of friends with kiddos with autism, right? That would be a terrible time for a kiddo with autism to come off their meds unexpectedly. And those meds you can't get in advance, right? I can ask for an additional 30-day prescription of my allergy prescriptions, but for these controlled substances, you can't get an extra supply. And so talk about how at the Red Cross, y'all deal with that.
So we have nurses who are on station at our shelters, and they have the ability to call into a local doctor and get those prescriptions filled once they do the verification process, which isn't very hard. And we are able to go to the local pharmacy and pick up that controlled prescription, and we'll be able to administer it while you're there at the shelter. And then when it's time for you to go, you can take it with you. So it is something that's super important. But again, it's one of those things that if you know exactly what you're taking and how much you need to take, it just makes the process go a whole lot faster.
Well, and the same is true for like eyewear, right? If I don't have glasses, I don't know my eye prescription, right? But if I have it written down somewhere and I can give it to my shelter representative, y'all can go source some glasses for me or a pair of contacts.
Correct. And if we know exactly what that prescription looks like, it makes it so much faster.
Yeah, so I want us to zoom back a little bit, and we have a question in the chat. I want us to think about maybe not in our immediate family, but one step removed. So the people that you will care for in the time of a disaster. So Tim's question is, what about different size diapers? Many of us are grandparents and have kids who have tiny kids. So how far out from our core family unit should we be looking and factoring in those people into the needs of those people into our own individual disaster kits?
Fantastic question. I think that comes back to how close are they? I mean, are they right down the street? If they're a couple thousand miles away and they don't visit often, then I'd say probably not. But if they're close, then you have an idea, of what your grands might need. And if you don't, you're always, it's always easy to pick up the phone and say, hey, Timmy's wearing what size diapers? I'm just going to update the go bag. And before Timmy gets from a size 3 to a size 4, maybe you want to give your kid the size 3 before Timmy grows out of them. It's one of those things where you can actually just kind of, as they're growing, continue to change that go bag or that supply that you may need to have, if all the family has to come to your place to weather the storm.
Well, and when I just recently updated my go bag, I was like, whoa, I've gained weight. These clothes don't fit me anymore. So too, just like this idea of it's really important that you review it every single year, because your body, your circumstances, your dependents change every single year. And two, if you're doing it every year, what you said, you can work the supplies into the thing that you're using now, so you're not creating all this waste of like, well, now I just got to throw out the diapers because they don't fit anymore. It's like, well, no, every year we're going to review this so that we can use up those diapers before we outgrow them.
Correct.
Talk to me about elderly people or people with different physical needs. What do we need to be thinking about when we are preparing for those groups of people?
Well, we want to make sure that we have all of the things that they need as far as for mobility or for any other things that would help them get to a better sense of normal. We want to make sure that we take that into consideration. So if you have someone with mobility issues, do you have an extra, whether that be a cane or a walker or whatever that apparatus is that they need? Do you have an extra one handy that you can kind of stash so that when it is time to go, you have that? That is one of those things where as we're developing that kit, we're taking in all of the things that our family is. So, we've talked about prescriptions for ones that need a controlled substance. Now we need to think about, okay, we've got somebody with, these issues. How can we work maybe with our doctor, maybe with their doctor? How can we work out a plan so that we're thinking about them? We're trying to make sure that we're including them in the plan so that it's not an afterthought after the disaster happens.
Love it. Love it. Put your questions into the chat or raise your hand if you want to ask Tony a question. I'm going to be a little vulnerable with you, my friend. I've never been to a Red Cross shelter, and it sounds really intimidating to me. So can you describe it to me? And like let's put our brains back into Thomas Fire, and what does it even look like, and how do I know where it is, and what should I expect?
So I would say the first thing that you want to do is you want to download the Red Cross Emergency app. That will show you where the closest shelter is. It'll tell you if we are co-locating pets in that shelter. You'll get the directions. You'll be able to plug that into your phone. You'll be able to drive there. When you get there, you will notice that a Red Cross shelter is open for everyone. If you need a shelter and you are close to it, it is open to you. And we want to make sure that we say that the Red Cross is open for everyone. And that shelter is open for as long as we are needed. When you come in, you're going to be greeted by, a Red Cross volunteer, and they're going to ask, do you need a shelter? Do you need somewhere to stay? And we're going to collect just a little bit of information just so we know who you are. And we're going to ask you if there's any medical or mental health needs that you might need. We have people who will be standing by. And then once we get all of that taken care of, we're going to take you to your place in the shelter. And we have, a waiting area, we've got a dormitory area, and then we've got a food area. And we're going to take you on a tour. We're going to show you where all of that is. And we're going to show you where the restrooms are. We're going to show you where the showers are. And we're going to get you we're going to make it as home as possible. So when you get there, you will have been greeted by someone. Someone will ask if there's any immediate needs that you have. And then we're going to show you around, and we're going to make sure that you know where everything is and you know what the schedule looks like, so that there's nothing that comes at you that we didn't tell you previously. You're going to see people walking through the shelters, and they're just going to be making sure that your needs are being met. After a day or so, you will see the same Red Crossers there, and you'll be able to get to know them, and you'll end up bonding kind of like a family. I know that depending on where that shelter is set up, it might be in a gymnasium for a school, it might be at the Ventura County Fairgrounds, but we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that it's as comfortable as possible, and that when you come in, you feel safe. Um, while you're there, we're going to take care of we're going to feed you. We're going to make sure you have something to drink. We're going to make sure that we're trying to do something as far as entertaining or giving information. Sometimes we have the local fire department come through and give a brief saying, hey, this is, in case of a wildfire, this is what the fire activity looks like. This is what we anticipate for the next few days. And then everyone wants to know if their house was spared. And we usually don't have that information. It usually comes a few days later, but we try to pass on as much information as we have to our clients. So the time that we have them under our care, we are doing everything we can to make them feel comfortable.
Thank you so much. The other thing that I want to stress is disaster response and recovery is a very long timeline, right? And so I think too, as people experiencing disaster, it's important for us to know that things may happen in a couple days. They may not happen today. And so the point there is, it's important that we advocate for ourselves and the people that we're caring for on what their immediate and urgent needs are. And we're going to fill in all the blanks eventually, but we need to advocate for ourselves. Right? Because y'all, if I don't tell you that I'm on blood pressure meds, you're not going to know that I need them. And then I'm going to become a medical emergency on top of the fire, right? So really advocating for our own needs. But two, it's been so interesting, going through Thomas Fire and the debris flow, which were my first disasters, and I was absolutely unprepared, and our community candidly was absolutely unprepared. But then watching as other disasters unfold, and they really do follow the same cadence, and things happen faster or slower, but there is this like immediate everything's ruined and nothing will ever get better, and whatever exists now will exist for forever. And it's like, just you're gonna need to be in a shelter for a minute, and it's not ideal, and it's not your favorite place to be, and you will get into a hotel, or the job of a Red Cross shelter is to close the Red Cross shelter, right? And to get people into a more stable location. So just, I think, having the sense of peace that the people are working the systems and things are going to get better every single day.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we try to stress is that, a Red Cross shelter is a lifeboat in a storm. We're not here for a very long time. We're here for as long as we're needed. But while we're here, we're open to everyone, and we are trying to meet as many needs as we possibly can.
Thank you. Thank you. We have one more question. Do you have any advice for dealing with people with anxiety during a disaster?
Well, we fortunately have licensed mental health workers who are if they're not in every shelter, they're itinerating between shelters. And sometimes we just need to have a quiet space for people with anxiety, and we try to build that into every shelter that we have. And when they are going through an episode where they just need someone to talk to, we have people who are there to do that. I know just the fact that for people who are struggling with anxiety, just not knowing and being in a foreign place and being around a bunch of people that you don't know, and that isn't family, can be overwhelming. And we do everything that we can to try to get them to a place where they understand what's going on, because sometimes it's just they don't have enough information, and maybe that's where we're coming in to give them that information and tell them, this is what this looks like, and right now we're in this phase, and then we're going to move into the next phase, which looks like this, and then the next phase that looks like this, to give them something to be hopeful for. So I think that is one of the things that our disaster mental health workers do very, very well.
Love it. Thank you so much. What other questions do people have, or lived experience or success stories? And perhaps we've done it, Tony. We have solved disaster. we've solved it.
Oh, I wish that were the case, but the next disaster will always show us where we're lacking, and I think it's a forever learning process. The Red Cross has been doing this for more than 100 years, and if we said that we were the very best at it, we'd be telling tales. So we try to learn from every single disaster, and we know, like you said, disasters have a cadence. We know what that looks like, but it's the nuance that makes things different. What happened in Maui was totally different than what happened in Ventura County for the Thomas Fire. Yes, they were both wildfires that burned out of control, and it took a long time for people to get to a place where now they're starting to do recovery, but the nuances were different, and that's our role. We have to try to understand that, and we have to try to get to a place where we are thinking, what is the next step? Knowing what we know now, what is the next step, and what should we anticipate with the shared knowledge that we've accrued through the years?
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And you're kind of like the dentist. I hope to never see you, but I'm glad you're here. Hope to never have to work with you, Tony, but really glad to have you in our community. And thank you so much for your time and energy today. And this was just really wonderful. So thank you. And we'll be sending out our version of the plan and also a blank plan. And I invite you to reply with questions. We're here to help. I'll say it one more time. The more prepared every individual and every organization is for a disaster, the better and more resilient we are as a community. So it really is in all of our best interest to make sure that your neighbors and your family and your friends are doing similar. You better believe I'm giving people go bags for Christmas. Sorry, everyone.
Well, thank you so much, Emily. And for anyone that needs more information, if you go to Be Red Cross Ready, if you type that into Google, you'll be able to look at what the Red Cross offers for businesses, for individuals and families, and you'll see all of the ways that you can be prepared.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Have a good week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.